do. I think, Martyn, you're up first, so Martyn Jansen from Register.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending the session. I think the theme for today really suggested itself, because certainly at EduServe, we don't know of an HE or FE institution that isn't doing some of this work across boundaries, partnering and collaboration. And in this session, as Andy said, this isn't technical. We want to raise some of the practical and licensing issues that you might face when endeavouring to work across boundaries. And hopefully, of course, in raising those issues, we'll suggest some answers. So, when I talk about licenses, I'm talking about the licence for the online learning resources that your users are trying to access. And really, I only want to make one point today. It really stems from the thought that even an event like this one concentrates very much on the technicalities of granting access. So you've got a bunch of students from a partner organisation. Should you assign them a separate scope? What permission should you assign? What attributes, etc., etc. And how do you treat entities? What systems do you integrate with? And all that kind of stuff. And there's already an underlying assumption there that you as the institution have got the entitlement to expand your resources in that way. Similarly, last month, I don't know if you saw it, HEFKI published a paper called Collaboration, Acquisitions and Mergers. There was really a series of case studies on people who've been on this journey, if you like. And that talked a lot about the problems of back office similisation, sharing buildings, aligning employment contracts and salary grades and TUPE and so forth. And again, there seems to be a sort of premise there that all you've got to do is overcome these infrastructural and administrative issues, and then you've unlocked your resources. The world's your oyster. So I really wanted to do a little bit of really basic revision on why licenses are different and might need a little bit of thought. So the first point here is, if you think of collaborations, you've got a number of resources. You've got teaching resources. Now you as the host institution, you either employ those teaching resources or contract them in under some or other contract of service. But you've got the freedom to instruct and deploy those resources as you see fit. Similarly with the physical resources in the network or your hardware or your comms, even your facilities, equipment, buildings, you either own those or you've got financial arrangements whereby you've got the rights of ownership. So again, you're free to do what you like with those resources, they're yours. Of course, with a license, you don't own anything. You get a right. A license is always a right to do something. Even the driving license is a right to use the roads. So you don't own anything. You're given permission to use these resources. The ownership always remains with the publisher. So you haven't got the same freedoms. And the second point there is, because all these resources you have physical control over, it's very easy to fall into the trap, therefore I can deploy them, I physically can do it, I'll do it. But you have to sort of stand back and think, well, really, am I entitled to do that or not? Next very basic point is the rights are granted to a specific legal entity. So for example, if the University of North Wiltshire had some resources, had licenses for some resources, and they decided to collaborate with the University of South Wiltshire, they can't necessarily make those resources freely available. It's a different legal entity. And similarly, if the two universities combined to create a new university called the University of Wiltshire, that doesn't mean that the licenses can automatically transfer to that new entity. Now, sometimes this can be a bit confusing, but if you think of something like the motor insurance policy, that covers just the specific individual or individuals named on the policy. It doesn't cover the whole world. So if you have a policy that covers you and your spouse, it doesn't mean your children are covered by that policy. So in the same way, you've got to look at which specific legal entity is being granted the rights under a licence. The next point, licences will of course be limited in some way by number of users, network servers, or whatever. And again, if you think of your driving licence, you can use certain class of vehicles. It's conditional upon you observing the speed limit, not being drunk, etc., etc. So certainly the licence for resources will have some constraints on it, and this needs to be thought about. Because if you think of the example where your institution maybe sets up a new campus in France, there's no third parties involved here, no partner involved, it's just your institution setting up a remote campus. That may or may not be allowed within your licence. It depends what terms are written. It might be written for a single network, it might be written for a single geographic location. So that's something else to think about. And finally, certainly if you look at the chess licences from EduServe, they attract a large discount on the basis that these are used for educational purposes only. And we can go into what educational purposes mean, but when you're doing some of these collaborations and broadening the horizons and crossing the boundaries and all the rest of it, you have to think, when you're getting into the commercial world, are some of your partners actually commercial entities, and some of the research you're doing has that actually got a commercial driver behind it? So that's really all I wanted to say. I mean, these aren't, not suggesting these are scary things, but just to be aware of them so you don't inadvertently breach your licence, or that you're not inadvertently under-licensed. They're not necessarily difficult things to overcome. I mean, on a chess standard licence, there is an extension you can buy for 5%, which will cover all your collaborations and partnerships. And of course, many publishers, which I'm sure Trevor's going to touch on, quite happy to extend the licence for a reasonable fee, as long as you bring these to their attention. So not things to be frightened about, but just things to be aware about and take care of. Thank you.
Thanks, Martyn.